Before sunrise in Lorraine, the most feared German tank in France was looking the wrong way. Its gun could kill a Sherman from more than a mile away. Its front armor could shrug off shots that would split other tanks open. Its optics were so clear that German gunners could turn a gray field into a firing range. But on that September morning in 1944, none of that mattered, because the American tanks were not in front of it. They came out of the fog on the flank, not for a duel, not for a fair fight, not for the kind of long-range contest the Panther had been built to win. 4 Shermans appeared just long enough to fire. The first shells hit side armor. The German tanks tried to turn. Too late. By the time the Panther turrets began grinding toward the threat, the Shermans were already gone behind the ridge. 20 seconds of exposure. A road blocked by burning steel. German crews shouting into radios at enemies they could not see. And that was the terrifying discovery of Arracourt. The Panther was not beaten because it was weak. It was beaten because the Americans found the part of the machine that was slow, and they built an entire killing system around it. By September of 1944, Patton's Third Army had torn across France faster than its supply trucks could follow. The breakout from Normandy had become a pursuit. German units were falling back, bridges were being seized, and whole towns were waking up to American armored columns already past them. But speed has a price. Fuel became the quiet master of the battlefield. A tank without fuel is not a weapon. It is a monument. Patton's columns slowed in the rain, not because the fighting spirit disappeared, but because gasoline had to cross hundreds of miles of shattered roads before the next mile could be taken. To the German high command, that pause looked like an opening. Hitler wanted a counterblow, not a token defense, a real armored strike into the flank of the American advance. The target was the Lorraine region, near Arracourt and the Moselle bridgeheads. If the German 5th Panzer Army could smash through the exposed American positions, it could threaten the crossing points, slow Patton's eastern drive, and buy time for the Western Front to harden again. So the Germans pushed forward 2 newly formed panzer brigades, the 111th and the 113th, along with other armored elements. On paper, this was exactly the kind of fight German planners wanted. The Americans had Sherman tanks, the Germans had Panthers, and in a direct comparison, the Panther looked like the answer to every American fear. Its frontal armor was thick and sloped. Its long 75mm gun hit with brutal velocity. Its profile, when it emerged from mist or trees, could turn experienced Sherman crews cold in the chest. American tankers already knew the nightmare. You fire. Your shell hits the Panther's front plate. It sparks, skips, or shatters. Then the Panther fires once, and your world becomes flame. That was the German expectation in Lorraine. They expected American armor to pull back, dig in, and call for artillery or aircraft. They expected Sherman crews to avoid head-on contact. They expected the Panther's gun and front armor to decide the fight before it ever became close. But the men of the U.S. 4th Armored Division had a different problem to solve. They did not need to make the Sherman stronger than the Panther. They needed to make the Panther fight in the one way it hated most: close, fast, confused, from the side. Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division knew the country around Arracourt was not flat tank duel country. It was a broken landscape of low ridges, villages, orchards, shallow draws, narrow roads, and fog that could erase a battlefield in minutes. That terrain was not just scenery, it was a weapon. A Panther at long range, with its gun settled and its bow facing the enemy, was almost impossible to handle with a standard Sherman. A Panther forced to react to a target that had appeared on its flank at a few hundred yards was a different machine. Still deadly, but no longer comfortable. The crucial difference was not only armor or gun size, it was response time. The Sherman had a fast, powered turret traverse system and good handling for the kind of short, violent movement American crews were about to demand from it. A Sherman gunner could swing onto a new target quickly, and the crew could do it while the driver was moving the tank in and out of cover. The Panther's power traverse was more complicated and less forgiving. Its turret response depended on the mechanical system, engine power, crew coordination, and the tank's ability to keep itself oriented under stress. It was not helpless. But it was not magic, and in close terrain, a few seconds were enough to turn superiority into panic. Imagine the German commander's view. He is moving down a road in the fog. He knows the Panther's strongest armor is facing forward. He expects danger from the front. Then a Sherman flashes out from a ridge on his left. Not 2,000 yards away. Not 1,000. A few hundred. The German gunner has to identify the target. The turret has to swing. The hull may need to shift. The commander has to call the correction. The loader has to stay braced inside a moving steel box. And while all of that is happening, the Sherman has already fired into the Panther's side. Then it is reversing out of sight. That was the window. Not a huge weakness. Not a movie-style fatal flaw where one shot solves the war. A window measured in seconds. But in tank combat, seconds are not small. Seconds are the battlefield. On September 19, 1944, the first German attacks around Arracourt ran straight into that truth. Fog sat over the fields. German columns moved with poor visibility, and the very weather that protected them from American aircraft also stole away the Panther's greatest advantage: long-range sight and fire. The Germans had better guns for a duel they could not see. The Americans had terrain, radios, aggressive movement, and crews willing to fight from angles that made no sense on a range table. Shermans appeared from ridge lines, fired, and vanished. Tank destroyers waited in covered positions. Artillery was registered on roads and likely assembly areas. When the weather lifted, fighter bombers from the tactical air forces could strike columns that had already been slowed or disorganized on the ground. The battle did not become one clean ambush. It became something worse for the Germans. A repeating pattern. Contact, confusion, flank shot, withdrawal, reappearance, again and again. The Panthers were being asked to fight as isolated giants in a country that rewarded smaller, faster teams. And there was another German problem buried under the armor. The Panzer brigades sent into Lorraine were powerful on paper, but they were not full, mature panzer divisions with every supporting piece in perfect balance. They were hurried formations, rushed into a crisis, short on the experience and coordination needed to make armor, infantry, reconnaissance, engineers, artillery, maintenance, and communications work as one body. A Panther without support is still a dangerous tank, but a Panther in bad terrain, with weak coordination, facing an enemy that knows where to hit and when to disappear, becomes something else. A target with a magnificent gun facing the wrong direction. The American commanders understood the shape of the fight quickly. Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, had already built a reputation for aggressive armor leadership. He did not treat speed as decoration. He treated it as a weapon. The Sherman could not win by pretending to be a Panther. It could win by being a Sherman at the exact moment the Panther needed it to be slow. The principle was brutally simple. Never give the Panther the fight it wants. Never sit in front of its gun. Never trade at long range if the front plate is all you can hit. Use folds in the ground. Let the German tank commit to the road or the visible threat. Strike from the flank. Fire first. Leave before the turret can answer. The courage required for that is easy to understate, because the tactic sounds clean on a map. It was not clean inside the tank. Inside a Sherman, every second had weight. The driver had to crest the ridge without exposing too much hull. The gunner had to have his turret already coming onto bearing. The commander had to read terrain while shells, branches, smoke, and fog turned the outside world into fragments. The loader had to keep rounds moving in a fighting compartment that could become a furnace if one German shot came home. And every man in the crew knew the same thing. If they hesitated, the Panther would not. So the American crews fought like men racing a clock they could not see. A Sherman noses over a rise. The commander spots the darker mass of a Panther through fog. The gunner is already traversing. The driver keeps the tank angled, ready to reverse. The gun fires. The Sherman is gone. Not because the crew is afraid, because staying would be stupid. The result was not a fair duel. It was a deliberate refusal to fight fair. And that is why Arracourt matters. War is filled with machines that look unbeatable until somebody stops asking what they can do and starts asking what they cannot do quickly enough. The Panther could dominate open ground. It could punish frontal attacks. It could kill at distances where many Sherman crews struggled to answer. But it could not be everywhere at once. It could not keep its strongest armor facing every angle. It could not turn a column road into a battlefield without exposing side armor. It could not erase fog. It could not make inexperienced formations instantly master combined arms. It could not make broken terrain flat, and it could not force the Americans to stand still. By the end of the first days around Arracourt, the German attack had lost momentum. Panthers that should have been terrifying breakthroughs were burning near road junctions, stuck in soft fields, or abandoned after mechanical trouble and combat damage made recovery impossible. American losses were real. Men died inside Shermans, vehicles burned. No one who fought there thought the Panther had become harmless. But the exchange was not what German planners had expected. The Germans had brought local armored strength into Lorraine. The Americans had turned local knowledge, terrain, and faster tactical reaction into a multiplier. The battlefield was teaching both sides, and it was teaching fast. German commanders began to adjust. They tried to coordinate better with infantry, widen formations, avoid narrow road columns, and protect flanks more carefully. They understood that American armor was not behaving like a nervous, inferior force. It was hunting for angles. But adaptation takes time. And the Germans had entered Lorraine without enough time to spare. The worst day for a bad assumption is the day after your enemy has learned how to exploit it. As the fighting continued, the American system widened. Shermans did not act alone when the situation allowed more tools. Tank destroyers, especially fast vehicles like the M18 Hellcat, were used to cover likely routes and hit from concealed positions. Artillery broke up formations and punished assembly areas. Reconnaissance helped identify movement before it became contact. When the sky opened, tactical aircraft attacked columns, transport, and exposed armor. The point was not that the Sherman suddenly became the best tank in the world. The point was that the American force was fighting as a network. The Panther was a superior dual weapon in many conditions. Arracourt denied it a duel. That difference destroyed the German plan. One of the most dangerous myths about armored warfare is that battles are decided by spec sheets, armor thickness, gun penetration, muzzle velocity, horsepower, top speed. Those numbers matter, They matter a lot. But numbers do not fight by themselves. Crews fight. Commanders fight. Maintenance crews fight. Fuel trucks fight. Radio discipline fights. Maps fight. Fog fights. Mud fights. The shape of a ridge fights. And in Lorraine, the ridges fought for the Americans. German tanks advancing through fog and rolling ground were repeatedly pulled into engagements where their range advantage disappeared. The Panther's long gun still had power, but power without time is useless. The front armor still had strength, but strength facing the wrong direction is a wall built on the wrong side of the house. That was the hidden equation. The American crews did not defeat the Panther by denying its strengths. They defeated it by making those strengths arrive too late. Consider what happens inside a Panther column when the lead vehicles are hit. The road narrows. A burning tank blocks movement. The vehicles behind bunch up. Commanders close hatches because fragments and bullets are moving through the air. Visibility collapses. Drivers try to maneuver heavy machines off-road into soft fields. Mechanical strain rises. The formation stops being a formation. It becomes a line of separate emergencies. And once that happens, the American pattern becomes even more dangerous. A Sherman section appears on one flank. A tank destroyer fires from a concealed angle. Artillery lands behind the column. Aircraft arrive when weather permits. The German commander can no longer solve one problem at a time, because every solution creates the next problem. Turn toward the Shermans and expose another side. Leave the road and risk bogging down. Keep moving and drive past hidden guns. Stop and invite artillery or air attack. This is how a stronger machine becomes trapped inside a weaker situation. By late September, the German 5th Panzer Army's counteroffensive around Arracourt had been shattered. The battle ran from September 18th to 29th, and the losses told the story more brutally than any speech could. German armored strength had gone into Lorraine, expecting to restore the front. Instead, it lost tanks and assault guns at a rate Germany could not replace. The U.S. 4th Armored Division paid for the ground in burned vehicles and dead men, but it had survived the blow it was supposed to collapse under. The panzer brigades that had looked so dangerous on paper were broken as effective instruments, and the road east remained open enough for the Allied advance to continue its pressure toward Germany. But the deeper lesson of Arracourt was not simply that Shermans could beat Panthers. That is too shallow. The lesson was that a worse machine can become the better weapon when it is used in the right system. The Sherman was not glamorous. It did not have the Panther's intimidating silhouette. It did not inspire the same fear when parked in a field. Its armor could be penetrated. Its gun, especially in the early 75mm versions, struggled in frontal duels against heavy German tanks. But the Sherman was reliable, numerous, mobile, repairable, and responsive. American crews could move it, recover it, fix it, coordinate it, and use it aggressively in teams. A tank is not just a gun on tracks. It is a promise that the army behind it can keep it alive long enough to matter. Germany built a masterpiece that demanded too much from the country trying to sustain it. America built a tool that could be produced, maintained, shipped, repaired, and used by thousands of crews under brutal conditions. At Arracourt, the tool beat the masterpiece. Not every time. Not without loss. Not because courage made steel irrelevant, but because the Americans understood the fight that was actually in front of them. The Panther's myth was built from ideal conditions. Open ground, long sight lines, a calm gunner, frontal armor toward the threat, a crew with time to identify, aim, and fire. Arracourt gave it fog, ridges, flank threats, hurried movements, imperfect coordination, and enemies that vanished before the response could arrive. In theory, the panther was a predator. In Lorraine, too often it was an animal with its head caught in a turning cage. There is a moment after an armored fight when the field becomes quiet in a way that does not feel peaceful. Engines tick as they cool. Burning fuel pops in the distance. Men climb out of vehicles and count who has not answered on the radio. The ground is torn, but it gives no opinion. Somewhere near Arracourt, American tankers looked at Panther wrecks that had terrified them for months and saw something they had not been taught to expect.
Not that the Panther was harmless, something more useful. It was human. It could be surprised. It could be rushed. It could be aimed the wrong way. It could break. It could be beaten by men who understood the difference between power and timing. That realization changed the way crews approached the rest of the war. A Panther silhouette was still dangerous, but it was no longer a monster from a nightmare. It was a machine with rules, and once you understand the rules, fear becomes work. That is what Arracourt stripped away. Not the Panther's armor, not its gun, not its place in history. It stripped away the illusion that better engineering automatically wins the battle. Because engineering does not live in a factory drawing. It lives in mud. It lives in fog. It lives inside a crew that has 3 seconds to decide whether to reverse or die. The Germans came to Lorraine, believing the Panther would restore control. The Americans answered with a lesson that every battlefield keeps repeating in different forms. The strongest weapon is not always the one with the thickest armor. It is the one whose crew understands the enemy's delay. At Arracourt, the Panther's delay was measured in turret movement, visibility, terrain, coordination, and time. The Sherman crews found that delay. They drove straight into it. They fired before it closed. And when the smoke cleared over the ridges of Lorraine, the machine that looked unbeatable on paper had learned the one fact no machine can escape. Power that arrives too late is just noise. The Panther was feared for what it could do in theory. At Arracourt, it died because American crews understood what it could not do in time.